Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's online event here at the University of California, Merced. My name is Ricky Hill. I am the e-recruiter here at UC Merced. A huge welcome to you once again. Tonight's topic will be financial aid, and specifically how to apply for financial aid here at UC Merced. Before we get started, let me give you a couple of quick Zoom tips. If you need to adjust your audio settings, you can do that in the lower left corner of your screen by clicking the audio settings button. If you'd like to adjust the size of your window, click on View Options in the upper portion of your screen. Lastly, and most importantly, we are here tonight for you to get all of your questions answered. So we do have a Q&A button for you located on your screen. You can go ahead and send in those questions. We're fully staffed behind the scenes with content experts to get to those. However, our presentation is jam-packed full of probably all the questions and answers that you may have tonight. So make sure to pay close attention to those slides as they flip across your screen. Part of that Q&A, we will have a live question and answer session at the end of the program as well. So make sure you stick around to the very end. Once again, my name is Ricky Hill, a great honor and privilege to be here with you tonight for how to apply for financial aid. At this time, I'd like to hand things over to the Director of Financial Aid and Scholarships, Ron Radney.
Thank you, Ricky. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to share some important information with you this evening on how to apply for financial aid. I am joined by several of my colleagues who will be monitoring chat, as Ricky mentioned, throughout the presentation, so get your questions in. I'm going to cover a lot of information, like Ricky said, hopefully to answer all of your questions. And towards the end of the presentation, I plan to show my top 7 financial aid tips, so stay tuned. In case you miss anything, the presentation will be available in a recording on our admissions website sometime within the next week. So let's jump into it. So UC Merced has achieved several national rankings. So I wanted to share a little bit about our university. We were ranked #1 in the nation for greenest college campus, #1 in the percentage of undergraduate students who receive need-based scholarship or grant aid, which is free money. #3 in the nation for the lowest average loan debt of our graduates. So that's an important one. And then #5 for creating social mobility, which basically means it's a measure of the increase in socioeconomic status of our graduates once they enter the workforce. So financial aid comes in several different funding sources, including federal, state, university, and private donors. There are generally 2 types of financial aid. What we call gift aid, such as grants and scholarships, which is free money that you don't need to repay. And then what we call self-help aid, which is work study or student loans, which I'll talk more about in just a few minutes. Next slide. Here are some of the common types of gift aid. So beginning on the left, the lower income students who complete a FAFSA may be eligible for a federal Pell Grant, awarded on a sliding scale up to a maximum of $6,895 for the year. And potentially they might be awarded a COG grant, which is a limited fund and typically given to the lowest income students. In the middle column, students who complete the FAFSA or California DREAM application may be eligible for state aid, which can be used if you're attending a California college or university. So Cal Grant A or Cal Grant B, which are the ones used at university level. Also, there's a middle class scholarship to assist students with household incomes below $191,000. This program is being restructured by the state, and we are awaiting details on who will be eligible and the amount of the awards, but we should have that out very soon. On the right, students attending UC Merced who are California residents submitted their aid application on time, meaning by the March 2nd deadline, have remaining financial need, may be awarded what we call a Bobcat grant, which is an institutional grant. We also have academic scholarships. For all of our incoming students, freshmen and transfer, you're automatically considered for UC Merced scholarships based on your admissions application data. There is no separate scholarship application you need to submit. For self-help aid, on the left is federal work study. And this provides funding for students to work on campus and earn up to the amount awarded. At UC Merced, you can work up to 18 hours per week while in school and receive a paycheck every 2 weeks. Wages vary depending on the job. It helps build your resume, and work study earnings do not affect your future financial aid eligibility. On the right, we have federal student loans, which are low interest educational loans to cover your cost of attendance. If you need them, you're not obligated to accept them, but you may be awarded them in case you need them. There are several types of loans, so it's important to understand the terms and conditions of each type. So for the California Dream Loan, this would be for students who completed the California Dream application. This particular loan, there's no interest or payments until 6 months after the student leaves school or drops below half-time enrollment. For students who completed the FAFSA, we have 3 different types of loans. Subsidized loan, which means it's very similar to California Dream Loan. There's no interest or payments until 6 months after you either graduate or drop below half-time enrollment. Unsubsidized loan, which is basically the same interest rate as the subsidized loan. The difference is the interest on an unsubsidized loan begins immediately. If you elect not to pay the interest while you're in school, it'll be capitalized into your loan at the end when you begin repayment. Regular payments start 6 months after you leave school or drop below half-time enrollment. Lastly, we have a Parent Plus loan, and this is a loan that the parents can borrow on behalf of their student. The parent is the borrower, and because of that, there is a credit check required. Interest begins immediately and payments begin when the loan is fully dispersed. However, parents may defer the payments while their student is enrolled at least half time. Okay, to apply for financial aid, if you're a US citizen or eligible non-citizen, you will need to complete the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, as we call it by acronym, at studentaid.gov. And if you're a non-citizen, listed here under the DREAM list, you should complete the California Dream application, and that's at dream.sac.ca.gov. For some students, it may be confusing as to which application they should complete. So for simplification purposes, you should complete the FAFSA if you are a US citizen or eligible non-citizen and have a social security number. If you are an undocumented student and meet AB 540 eligibility, you should complete the California Dream application. AB 540 eligibility includes attending a California high school for at least 3 years, graduating from a California high school, or attained a GED. File or plan to file an affidavit that you will apply for legal residency as soon as possible and not be holding a non-immigrant visa. So here is a list of information you need to gather to complete your FAFSA. Includes, you're going to need an FSA ID number, which you can apply for online. And note that students and parents will both need FSA IDs separately, because that replaces your signature on the application, and you'll each need to sign the application. You'll also need your social security number and or your alien registration number and a driver's license. Your 2021 federal income tax returns, if you were required to file, or if your parents were required to file. And the W-2 statements, if you were employed or your parents were employed, and records of other earnings, if applicable. Your parents' 2021 federal income tax return with W-2s as well, and then current financial statements and records of investment, if applicable. So these would be like checking savings balances, any non-retirement investments your parents may have, a 529 plan or educational savings plans, annuities and trusts, net worth of business and or farm if employing more than 100 full-time employees. Also, record of any untaxed income if applicable. And finally, you'll need the school codes for the schools that you're thinking about applying to. So for students completing the California DREAM application, it's very similar. So instead of a FSA ID, you'll need a DREAM Act ID, and you can get that online at dream.csac.ca.gov. And again, both you and your parents will need a DREAM Act ID. You'll need, if you have a social security number or a taxpayer identification number, ITIN, and a driver's license. Also, your federal income tax return, if you filed or required to file, W-2 forms, also for your parents. And then the same thing with records of investments and any untaxed income. I was going to say, because California DREAM application questions are very similar to the FAFSA, I'm just going to show screenshots of the FAFSA application. The only major difference is that the student who is completing the DREAM application cannot use the ICER data retrieval tool, which we'll talk about in a few slides. So when you log on to studentaid.gov for the first time, this is to complete the FAFSA, click on Considering School tab, which you see kind of in the middle of the slide. And then on the Apply for Aid, using the FAFSA form link, which is in the lower bottom right hand of the screen. You can see there, and you click on that. So if you're a new college student completing the application for the first time, click the Start Here button, which you see in the middle. The student, a parent, or a preparer can begin the application process for the student as long as they have the student personal information. So you would click which one you are here, and you can go through and start completing the application for the student as long as you have the personal information. You'll be asked to create an FSA ID, as I mentioned earlier, or log on to continue if you have already created an FSA ID. So to create an FSA ID, you'll need to input your name exactly how it appears on your Social Security card. If your last name has a suffix, such as junior or the third, include a space between the last name and the suffix. Also input your date of birth, input your Social Security number, and confirm that you entered your Social Security number accurately before moving forward with the process. Ensure that these three pieces of information are accurate before proceeding, because they are critical to your application, that they are correct. So you then create your FSA ID and password here, and then click Login. On the Getting Started screen, it will ask which school year you're completing the application for. Be sure to select the correct school year. If you're beginning school next year in the fall, you would select the 2023-24 FAFSA. So make sure you select the correct one. So you also need to create what's called a save key. And this allows you to save your progress. Be sure to write down your save key because you'll need it to log back into the computer to complete your saved application if you don't complete it all in one sitting. You will also need to provide your parents with the save key so that they can electronically sign your application at the end. This introduction screen provides several resources that you can access in order to help you complete the application. It will answer a lot of questions for you to help you through the process. So the application is divided into 7 sections, and you see that kind of at the top in the screenshot where it shows sections 1 through 7. The application will auto-save whenever you complete an entire section, but you will, if you need to pause at any time, you need to save and exit and come back later using your save key. Do not submit it until you have completed the whole application, but you can save and exit and then come back into it with your save key. I'm not going to go through all the FAFSA screens, but I will walk you through a few of them from each section so you get a sense of what it looks like and tips on how to complete them. So an important first tip is the term you or your on the application always refers to the student. This can be confusing at times, especially if the parent is the one completing the form on behalf of the student. So when it's talking about you, it doesn't mean you, the parent, it means you, the student. So please be aware of that as you move through the sections. So step one, the student's email address will automatically transfer from the FSA ID information. If you would like to enter your phone number, you can do it here. This will be the email address initially used by colleges to communicate important financial aid information to you once you are admitted and registered at the college. Most likely all future communications at that point will be through your institutional email address that you'll be assigned. But initially, most schools will use this email address. So make sure it's an email address that's good, that you'll be able to go back and reference to make sure there's no communications that have been sent to you that you need to respond to. So the demographics screen can be confusing for some students, and here's some more tips on how to complete this. So the high school completion status when you begin college next year is you should select high school diploma. So high school completion status should be high school diploma. The next question, college degree or certificate seeking, you should put first bachelor's degree because that is the degree that you're working on first, which is your undergraduate or bachelor's degree. And then the first bachelor's degree, select no, that you will not have a first bachelor's degree by the time you start because you'll be an incoming freshman or transfer student. And finally, grade level. You should indicate never attended college first year. Even if you have college credits from high school, because it will be your first time applying for federal student aid, you should put never attended first year. So moving on to step number 2, school selection screen. You'll be asked to enter your current high school information by clicking on the search button and selecting your high school from the database. Once you select it, just push continue. So you're then asked to enter the colleges you're applying to. You can select up to 10 colleges. If you're applying to more than 10 colleges, you can log back in later after you've submitted your application and then edit your application and delete the colleges you have listed, and you can list new ones at that point and then resubmit. And then it will be sent to those colleges as well. In step 3, dependency status, you'll be asked about the student's current marital status. You are also asked if the student has any dependent children of their own or other dependents, such as elderly parents, for which they are providing at least 50% of their total support. All of our students will answer no to this question. You're then asked for some additional dependency questions to determine if you will need to provide your parents' information on the application. If none of these questions apply, you should select none of the above. So the form will indicate your dependency status for financial aid purposes. In this example, it says dependent student status. You can see it in bold, kind of in the middle of your screen. So if you're considered an independent student, it will tell you independent student. If you're a dependent student, it will tell you dependent student, and then it will ask for your parents' information if you're considered a dependent student. For clarification, the term parents refers to your biological or adoptive parents. If you were raised by someone other than your parents, and you have not had contact with your parents, mark that you are unable to provide information about your parents, and then you'll need to contact the financial aid office of each of the schools you're applying to request what is called the dependency override. And you will need to provide documentation of your situation so that they can make that determination for you. If approved, then the campus will go into your federal application, and they'll mark that a dependency override was initiated, and then your application will be processed. So section 4, parent demographics, asks information about your parents' marital status and household size. If your parents are separated or divorced, provide information for the custodial parent. If that parent is remarried, then you'll also need to include your step parents' information as well. This screen asks for the number of dependent children your custodial parent or step parent, if applicable, support, more than 50%. Include dependent children who will be receiving at least 50% of their support during the next school year, which is July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024, and can answer no to all the dependency questions in the dependency status pop-up link. You see the little icon there, question mark icon next to dependency status. That's a pop-up link that you can look at to make sure that they could answer no to all of those things. Do not include yourself when reporting the number of dependent children. So the student would not report themselves because you're automatically included in that number. Include other dependents, such as elderly parents who are receiving at least 50% of their total support from your parents, and will continue to do so during the next school year. Step 5, parent financials. This is probably the most difficult section to complete in the application, but if you have all the parent information gathered ahead of time to complete the FAFSA, and most importantly, use the informational pop-ups next to each question to see where on the tax form or W-2 form to find the information you need, you'll be fine. You'll be able to breeze right through this. So for parent tax filing status, enter if your parents have already completed their 2021 federal income tax return and what tax form they used. It also asks for the tax filing status on the form, meaning did your parents file married, filing jointly, or head of household, or how did they file? If the parents filed a 2021 tax return, you have the opportunity to use the IRS data retrieval tool to automatically transfer their tax information from the IRS into your application. This will prevent errors and help avoid any processing delays, but will require your parents to log in to transfer the data. If you do not use this feature, you'll need to enter your tax information manually in the application. So I would highly encourage you to use the IRS data retrieval tool. Student financials. So enter the student's 2021 tax filing status. So if the student filed a 2021 federal income tax return, you would also be eligible for using the IRS data retrieval tool. If you earned money but were not required to file a tax return because you didn't earn enough, you will indicate that you did not file and will then be able to answer questions about your earnings and how much income you had. So last step number 7, sign and submit. The student must indicate how they and their parents, if applicable, will sign the application. If the parent does not have an SSN and will not be able to obtain an FSA ID, there are other options to sign the FAFSA. Click on the other options button. I just want to reiterate that I did not go through all the FAFSA screen, but I think that I provided you with a sense of what to expect. So you should be able to get through this application without any issues. So once you submit your FAFSA, it's processed by the federal government and then sent electronically to the colleges you listed on your application, as well as to the California Student Aid Commission. Colleges use the data to determine your federal, state, and institutional aid eligibility, which will vary from campus to campus. Even within the same system, like the CSU or UC systems, each campus will determine your eligibility independently of each other. The California Student Aid Commission uses the data along with your GPA reported from your high school to determine your state Pell Grant eligibility. If you completed a California Dream application, your application will be processed by the California Student Aid Commission and data is sent electronically to each California college or university listed on the application. The California Dream application is not good for out-of-state colleges. It's only for in-state colleges. The college will use this data to determine your state and institutional aid eligibility. The California Student Aid Commission uses the data along with your GPA also to determine your Pell Grant eligibility. So here we are at my top 7 tips. You made it through this far. I think we can make it all the way through. Okay, so let's start. Next slide. Tip number 1, apply for admission. Financial aid offices will typically determine aid eligibility only after a student has been formally admitted to the college and their financial aid application data has been received electronically from the federal government or from the California Student Aid Commission. Just be aware that the UC admissions deadline is November 30th. So when you apply to UC campus, please be aware that the UC Student Tuition Stability Plan freezes your UC system-wide tuition and fees for up to 6 years or until you graduate, whichever occurs first. The intent of this program is to provide some cost stability to you and your family. So your tuition will be frozen, system-wide tuition and fees for up to 6 years. Tip number 2, apply for financial aid. Complete the financial aid application by the March 2nd priority deadline. If you are also applying to schools in other states, please be aware that each state has its own FAFSA priority deadline. California is March 2nd, but other states it's different. So make sure that you figure out what the deadline is for the FAFSA in those other states. If you need assistance in completing the aid application, try to attend a FAFSA or California Dream application workshop. You can check with your high school counselor or online for workshops near you. So the UC has a blue and gold opportunity plan, which is essentially a promise the UC system-wide tuition and fees will be covered for students with household incomes below $80,000 with gift aid from a combination of federal aid, state aid, and institutional aid. So if you were a student that got a Pell Grant and a Cal Grant, most likely your system-wide tuition fees are going to be covered. If you're a student that was below $80,000 household income, but you didn't get a Pell Grant and you didn't get a Cal Grant, then we would help you with enough funds to meet that obligation. So beginning in 2022-23, the Native American Opportunity Plan is a new program. It's similar to our Blue and Gold Opportunity Plan in that it guarantees that eligible Native American, American Indian, and Alaskan Native tribe students will have enough gift aid to cover their system-wide tuition and fees. We identify potentially eligible students based on their admissions application and invite them to submit required documentation of their eligibility. So tip number 3, identify special circumstances. So the FAFSA and the California Dream application ask you for your prior year income. We realize that your household income may have changed since then. If you have experienced a recent loss in household income, parent separation, divorce, since filing your financial aid application, a one-time payment received temporarily inflating their income, or any of those things, you're encouraged to complete a loss of income form at each college that you apply to. On our campus, we call it a special circumstance request form. If you have additional out-of-pocket expenses not covered by insurance, such as medical, dental, optical, you commute a long distance to school, or you have a disability-related expenses, or a recent computer purchase for college, you can submit those expenses to each college. you apply to, and on our campus, we call it a cost of attendance adjustment form. So please be aware of these special circumstance forms. Tip number 4, advice given to me by my high school counselor many years ago was to apply to at least 3 schools: my dream school, a local school, and a safety school. Don't talk yourself out of applying to your dream school just because of the sticker price. Once you receive your financial aid offer, subtract the total gift aid from the cost of attendance to determine the net price to compare one school to another. So even if you have a school that is very expensive, if they give you a lot of financial aid, the net cost may be less than a campus that is less expensive but not giving you as much aid. So here's an example. Many of you, you can see that Merced's cost of attendance on the left is much higher than the CSU campus example on the right. So on the left, you see currently for 22-23, cost of attendance about $39,000 to live on campus. At a CSU, it's about $23,000. Now, the average amount of aid that we would give a lower income student, a low income student, you can see here, totaling about $28,000 for a net price of about $8,700, which would need to be covered with self-help aid. On the right, the CSU example, even though their cost of attendance is lower, the typical amount of financial aid the same student would receive to attend there at about $13,000 would leave a net price of over $10,000. So in this example, for a student that's a low-income California resident undergraduate student, the net price is actually less at UC Merced. So tip number 5, applying for scholarships. When applying for scholarships, prioritize your efforts. So number 1, I would say focus on institutional scholarships first to those schools that you've applied to. You will only be competing against the other students who have applied at the same university. Then focus on regional scholarship opportunities, which are typically advertised at your school. Then you will only be competing against students in your region. Lastly, I would spend my efforts in focusing on national scholarships, since you'll be competing against students nationwide. Scholarship application processes and deadlines vary dramatically by school and system. At UC Merced, as I indicated earlier, we use your admissions application data to determine all new incoming student scholarships. Stay in contact with your school counselor for information on local or regional scholarships. Avoid scholarship scams that ask for confidential information like your social security number, date of birth, and never, never, never pay to apply for a scholarship. Scholarships are free by nature and should be free to apply to. And lastly, report all outside scholarships to your financial aid office. And if you have VA benefits, please contact the VA services office at each campus that you apply to. So there are generally 3 types of scholarships: merit-based, which are academic scholarships based primarily on academic performance, talent, and leadership skills. Need-based scholarships, which are based primarily on financial need and academic performance. And then athletic scholarships, which obviously are associated with participation in athletic programs. The majority of scholarships nationally are typically awarded between February and April prior to the start of the new school year. So number 6, understand student loans. We went through several types of student loans in an earlier slide. While the student loans may be offered to you, you're under no obligation to accept them, or you may accept a lesser amount. What you're going to be offered will be the maximum amount, but you don't need to accept the maximum amount if you don't need it. So we're down to the last tips. Tip number 7, pay attention to deadlines. Financial aid funds are limited, so priority consideration is given to students who meet the deadlines. So make sure that you meet the application deadline as well as any document submission deadlines. And what I mean by that is once you apply and we receive your information electronically from the federal government or the California Student Aid Commission, we're going to indicate on a checklist on our web portal what documents we need from you to finalize your financial aid file. And there is a deadline associated with those documents, so make sure that you meet all the deadlines. And now I'd like to turn it over to our director of our Students First Center, Dr. Lisa Perry.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lisa Perry, and as Ron said, I am the director of the Students First Center. Our Students First Center at UC Merced is your one-stop for admissions, financial aid, registration, and billing. So at our university, you just need to remember one phone number, one email address, and then we will get you the answers you need or get you to the person who can answer them if we can't. I would echo what Ron said about applying on time, checking your emails, and asking us sooner rather than later if you have questions. We are always here to help, and I will drop our contact information in the chat.
Thanks, Lisa. You want to hang around and help me with a couple of questions, possibly live?
Yes, sure. I am right here.
Let's do it, Ricky.
All right, thank you both so much for being on camera tonight with me, and let's dive directly into our questions. Can you guys talk a little bit more and elaborate on what the work-study program is? And is there a maximum number of hours?
So federal work-study program is the federal government gives us funds to help employ students on campus. The federal government pays 75% of the students' wages and the institution pays 25%. So it's a great deal for the institution, and the student gets to work and get work experience for the resume. At UC Merced, the maximum number of hours per week is 18 hours while the student's in school. We don't want the students' work to interfere with their academic performance. So we put 18-hour requirement as the maximum hours. You could work less than 18 hours, depending on the job and your course schedule. Other campuses, it might be a little different than 18 hours. Typically, it's up to 20 hours at some other campuses, but on ours, it's 18 hours. Now, if you're not awarded federal work study, there are still opportunities for you to work on campus and earn a wage. We have what's called student assistant jobs on campus. The only difference really between the two is the funding source. Like I said, the federal government gives us funds for federal work study, whereas a student assistant is paid 100% by the hiring department on campus. That's really the only difference between the two. And there are opportunities for both on campus. So hopefully that answers your question.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ron. A quick reminder to everyone in attendance, the screen that you see right now would be a fantastic screen for you to grab that smartphone, take a quick screenshot of that for reference in the future. We will go ahead and leave that up for just another minute or so, and then we will take that down so that you can see our smiling faces answering your great questions tonight a little bit bigger. All right, speaking of questions, let's go on to the next one here. Is the Bobcat grant only for Merced?
Yes, we call it a Bobcat grant. It's actually called the University Student Aid Program in the UC system, and each campus is allocated funds. On our campus, we call it the Bobcat grant. Another campus, they're going to call it based on, name it after their mascot. So it's named differently at every campus, but it's generally similar funds. That is unique to the UC. In other universities, they may have institutional aid, but it's called something completely different.
Great. All right. So the next question coming in, what does someone do if they don't have a social security number? Does that mean that they need to use the CATA, or can they still file for FAFSA?
Well, going back to one of the very first screens, which was which one you should complete, which application you should complete, you need to look at which one you meet the requirements for. So if you're a US citizen or eligible non-citizen, which means you have permanent residency, you should complete the FAFSA. You will be required to enter a social security number on the FAFSA. On the California Dream application, you do not need a social security number. If you have one, great, but it will ask for your ITIN number if you have an ITIN. So you can complete that application without a social security number if you're a California Dream student.
All right, the next question. Since funds are limited, do you need to apply to a UC FAFSA and the FAFSA FAFSA in order to be eligible for aid?
In the UC, the deadline is March 2nd. And so completing the application in October versus February really doesn't make a difference. But I would really strongly encourage you to complete it sooner than later, just because we end up getting a ton of students that try to submit it at the very last minute. And there have been years where the FAFSA database has gone down at the last minute because it's been bombarded nationwide by students waiting to the very last second. So I would highly encourage you to complete it sooner than later, but it won't make a difference, at least in the UC, in the amount of aid that you are eligible for.
And is it possible that even after filling out my financial aid application, that result will come back as not receiving any type of aid? Or is it just a matter of what type of aid I may be eligible for?
Yeah, great question. So when you complete the FAFSA, what it's going to tell you is whether or not, based on the information you provided, you might be eligible for a federal Pell Grant. So if your income is too high to be eligible for a Pell Grant, it may tell you that your income is too high, but that doesn't mean you're not going to be eligible for other forms of aid. So there are, like I said, there are state aid and there's institutional aid that you may be eligible for, but you need to complete the FAFSA to determine if you are eligible for those other forms of aid. So the FAFSA isn't going to tell you you're not eligible for any aid. It's just going to tell you your eligibility for Pell Grant.
And can we talk for a moment about scholarships? Is there anything special someone needs to do to make sure that they are trying to request those scholarships or apply for anything in particular, or does FAFSA cover that?
FAFSA, we use FAFSA information for some of the need-based scholarships, but by and large, we use the admissions application data for determining incoming student scholarships. So there are questions on the UC application that get at different things like, do you have any affiliation with certain clubs or organizations? And then we might have a scholarship associated with one of those organizations that we can award to you. I mean, it's just all information that we pull off of the admissions application. And then, like I said, if the particular scholarship requires that there be a need component, financial need component, then we use the FAFSA or California Dream application data to determine if the student meets that component of the scholarship before we award it. So it's a combination.
And I was going to say, so basically, as a new student, you only have to fill out your financial aid application and your admissions application, and we will consider you for all scholarships that UC Merced offers, right?
Correct.
Yes. So we make it easy for you. But as a continuing student, so your second year, there could be a supplemental, or there is, not could be, there's a supplemental application that you would have to fill out for scholarships, but you don't need to worry about that yet. Right now, your first year, we make it easy. And then I saw a lot of people asking about scholarships. There's also a great resource on our financial aid website that has some links for outside scholarships, because I also recommend looking for outside scholarships, which you can do on the web. You can do with local service organizations. So that could be like Rotary, Kiwanis, Seroptimus, Lions Club. And then your high school probably knows about local scholarships as well. And if you're a transfer student, your community college might also have information for you too. So just adding some more details for you.
Great points.
All right, on the topic of scholarships, since we're hanging out here, let's go ahead and ask this one. Does UC Merced offer anything that would be considered a full ride scholarship? We hear that term used quite often.
Well, it depends on how you define full ride scholarship. Some institutions define it as covering the tuition and fees. Others define it as covering tuition fees and housing. I think there's some private universities that really define it as meeting all of the costs of the student. At this point, we don't have any what we would consider full ride scholarships to cover everything. That would primarily be at a private university, a well-endowed private university. In the UC, we do our best to provide as much gift aid as we can to every student, and hopefully leave them with very little that they need self-help aid to cover. And self-help aid would be either making payments on the balance, borrowing a student loan. If you have scholarships, outside scholarships that you're bringing with you, that could help meet your self-help. So there's a few different options for meeting that self-help component, but we try our best to cover as much as we can for the students.
Fantastic. And where does work study fall under FAFSA and financial aid? Where exactly does that go in their package, and how does that impact them or help them?
So we get a limited allocation of federal work study funds, as does every campus, and it's not equal. It is based on how big of school you are. And so we get an allocation, and it is determined based on your FAFSA data. And so we award it to students who have unmet need, who qualify. And so you could work and earn up to the amount that we award to you. You can work throughout the year and get a paycheck every 2 weeks and earn up to the amount that you've been awarded. And I mentioned earlier that if you're not awarded federal work study, that there are other opportunities on campus to work, called student assistant positions. And those are typically advertised on campus by each department that is hiring, and that department will pay your full wages. But you're also restricted to the number of hours you can work per week.
And using that same kind of guideline there, what if I have a job that's not on campus? So if I work someplace in the community, retail or a restaurant, how does that impact my financial aid, or does it?
It doesn't for the current year. But when we get 2 years down the road, when you're completing another FAFSA in 2 years as a continuing student, and it asks for what your federal income tax return is or your earnings, then you would be reporting that income at a later date for a future FAFSA. So it could potentially impact you down the road, but not for the current year.
Great information. Can we talk about what financial aid verification is and when those deadlines are coming up?
Sure. So when a student completes a FAFSA or California Dream application, they're selected for a process called verification. About a third of the applicants are selected. And students are selected both randomly, and if you make a lot of just obvious errors on your application, you may be selected as well. And so basically what the government is saying is they want the school to verify what the student put on the application is accurate and correct. And we do that by asking for copies of like your federal tax returns and other documents, so we can verify that what you put on your application is actually accurate. That's called verification. If we find something that is off, that you misreported, we will correct it electronically and recalculate your egg eligibility. Also, I mentioned earlier that we will also post any documents we need from the student on their student web portal. And most of those documents are going to be verification documents. So the student would need to complete those by a certain date. Typically on our campus is June 1st. And submit all of that so we can review their file and have it ready for them to go by the time they start in the fall. Lisa, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, at UC Merced, we use a personalized checklist tool that, as Ron mentioned, is inside your student portal, and that checklist is tailored to each student. So anything we need from you for financial aid, for admissions, for registration, for like health insurance, we put it on that checklist, and pretty much everything on there can be submitted online. So we try to make it as easy for you as possible. And then also the Students First Center is always here to guide you through that process. And our admissions office is also really great and does a lot of webinars throughout the admissions timeframe to answer those questions in a timely manner, like when you need the answers to them, basically.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. Do students find out their financial aid package at the same time about their acceptance?
So most universities in California, you will begin finding out about your acceptance. It varies. It usually begins, I think, in February, and then it goes on after that, depending on if you're a new student or transfer student. Financial aid is typically awarded by most universities in California by early to mid-March. Sometime in March is typically when we start sending out award packages to students. So if you don't get something by late March, you need to be calling because there might be an issue with your application.
Very good. And then also kind of similar to that question, will the financial aid package be the same for every campus, every UC campus, or otherwise even other schools? Will it be the exact same or does it vary?
It's going to vary because the institutional aid at each campus varies by campus. So the Pell Grant eligibility will be the same at each campus. The Cal Grant eligibility will be the same at each campus, but the institutional aid eligibility will be different, at least within the CS or UC system. Now, if you attend a CSU campus, the Cal Grant amount is going to be different because their tuition is different. Their institutional aid is going to be different because they have a lower cost. So, but within the UC system, yes, your federal aid should be very similar. Your state aid should be very similar, but the institutional aid will vary by campus because the allocations at each campus are different.
Very good. And we are getting close to the top of the hour and wrapping up this fantastic event tonight. So just another couple quick things here. Can we give our audience the reminder of when FAFSA and CAUTA opens and when it closes?
So it opened October 1st. So it's already open. And the priority deadline is March 2nd. So if you need help completing your application, like I said, there are workshops potentially in your area. Talk to your high school counselor or community college counselor about workshops, FAFSA workshops. There's also online support for those things as well, tutorials that you can find. Lisa, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you covered it, but there was one, I was looking at the questions in the chat. Sorry, I got distracted for a minute. There was one question in the chat that I wanted to get to because I can't undo it. Can we cover it really quick?
For sure.
It is, if parents have 2 children going to college, will the grants be split for each one of them, or will one child be lucky and the other one won't?
Well, it depends because when you fill out the FAFSA, it's going to ask for the student's income information as well as the parents. Now, when you're completing the FAFSA for 2 students simultaneously, the parent income should be exactly the same on both, right? But if one student worked and the other didn't, then there could be a little bit of change in their eligibility, a slight change depending on how much they earned. So they might not look. The other thing is when they filed the application, because if one filed on time and one filed late, aid that you receive. So it depends.
Very good. That's a great question to wrap up tonight. And I will give Ron and Lisa just a moment if you have any last minute words of advice you'd like to offer.
Yeah, just what I said earlier, if you have questions, ask. Don't wait. And then as Ron said, a really good point is if you haven't gotten your financial aid offer by the end of March from any school that you are admitted to, you should contact that school. There could have been a problem with matching your FAFSA with your admissions application, or maybe you didn't list our school code. It's very common. And so we want to make sure that there isn't a delay, because most schools, the goal is to give you your financial aid offer with enough time for you to make an informed decision on where you want to attend. So ask for help sooner rather than later is my biggest tip.
Great tip. First off, I would like to thank all of our colleagues that are on this webinar with us that have been answering your questions throughout the presentation. So thank you to all of them. I would say that this presentation, we covered a lot of material, and I know I went through it fairly quickly. This is being recorded and it will be on our admissions webpage within the next week. So you're welcome to go back in, click on it, and go through slide by slide and get all the information that you may have missed. Other than that, I would just say make sure that you research the deadlines and meet all the deadlines, because that's probably one of the most important things.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for joining me on screen tonight, and all of those fast fingers behind the scenes. We answered so many questions, and of course we wouldn't be here without our audience sending us those questions. So you all did a fantastic job tonight. So one thing I do want to drop over into the chat, and also don't forget to look at the chat. We have been dropping some good information for you there. I am going to go ahead and drop in some social media links for the admissions office. If you do have any future questions, definitely follow us. We recently added our TikTok channel, and we are dropping videos there like crazy every week, so definitely take a look there. We also offer some fun contests there as that channel grows. All right, in addition to that, as a quick wrap up, I'd like to give you a couple of quick reminders. If you haven't yet come and visited our beautiful campus, you are in luck. We are offering campus tours 7 days a week. So definitely take a look at that link that we will drop into that chat for you. Get yourself and your family signed up to take a trip to UC Merced. There is nothing like being here in person. You can see in some of the photos behind us, we have so many beautiful green spaces, but we are also very sustainable in that way of being green as well. Very high tech. Our campus has just doubled over the past couple of years and continues to grow. So it is something that you really need to see in person to fully appreciate, and you can do that 7 days a week. So get yourself signed up for that. One other thing I'd like to remind you of, this event tonight has been recorded, as Ron mentioned. We have many more events coming up in the next couple of months. So we will go ahead and drop that link for you into the chat box so you can get yourself registered for one of those. You will also find all of the on-demand recording links there as well. Just to give you a little preview, in the next couple of weeks, we will be doing some application workshop type sessions where you can join us, typically on Monday evenings at 7 p.m. And we will be there focusing on different portions of the application. So the About You section, academic history, activities, the PIQs, the personal insight questions section. And after that, into November, we will also have some last minute chat type sessions where you can come there with any question that you may have. Because of course, mark your calendars, November 30th is that application filing deadline for the admissions process. So make sure you mark your calendar for that. Join us for all of these fun events where you can get every one of your questions answered by one of my colleagues here, either behind the scenes or on screen with you. And once again, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We've had so much fun being here. We hope to see you at a future event, either virtual or on campus. We are doing them on campus as well. Have a great night, everyone. See you soon.